Brought to you by 1AAuto.com, your source for quality replacement parts and the best service on the internet.
Hi, I'm Mike from 1AAuto. I hope this how-to video helps you out. And next time you need parts for your vehicle, think of 1AAuto.com. Thanks.
In this video, we're going to show you how to replace a front hub on this 2005 Chrysler Town and Country, same as most of the Chrysler minivans from this era, 2004 to 2008. Bad hub usually makes a humming sound, and usually when you turn the direction of it, it quiets. So if your right front hub is bad, usually on a kind of a right-hand curve, you don't hear the humming as much. The tools you're going to need are a jack and jack stands. You'll need 15, 19, 21, and 32 millimeter sockets. That 32 millimeter socket's a big socket. You'll need a breaker bar or a pipe for some leverage, some penetrating oil, a hammer, the bigger the better, a T45 Torx or 8 millimeter Allen driver, flat blade screwdriver, large C-clamp, and torque wrench. And if your vehicle is a northeastern or rust belt vehicle, this can be difficult, and sometimes can be hard to get the hub out of the steering knuckle. But for southern vehicles, vehicles that aren't prone to rust or corrosion, it's usually a pretty straightforward replacement. Okay, so here I've fast forwarded a little bit, and I'm removing the cotter pin that holds the cover, and then that allows you to get to the center hub bolt. And if you don't have air tools, you'll want to do this. You'll want to put a couple of lug nuts back on the wheel, put the vehicle back down on the ground, and then you're going to want to use a large breaker bar and a 32 millimeter socket to get that nut off. Do this at a later time once you have the brakes apart, but once you do get that nut off, you want to just wrap the end of the axle with a hammer. If you give it one good hit, it should break loose, and once it breaks loose, you know you can get the hub off without much problem. Okay, so if you're using just regular hand tools, then you take your wheel off the rest of the way. Again, if you're using impact tools, then it doesn't really matter, but if you do see that it's hard to get your wheel off, put a couple lug nuts back on and then hit the top or the bottom of the tire. The lug nuts just help so the tire doesn't fly off when it breaks loose.
Okay, so now we can check our condition of our brakes. Okay, you can see the rotors. If you take a back of your fingernail, this surface should be pretty smooth. On this vehicle, these are pretty deeply grooved, so this rotor at the very least needs to be turned, and by the look of the condition of it, we're going to replace it. And if you're replacing the rotor, you're going to replace your brake pads anyways. And we can look in here, and you can see that brake pad, so here's the metal of the pad, the metal of the rotor, and in between there is the pad, and you can see it's pretty thin. Okay, so this is in need of some new brakes in the front here.
Using the steering wheel or turning the wheel, just make it so you can get to the back of the caliper easily. To remove your brake caliper,
here,
there are two bolts, one there, and one down there.
And it's actually
a T45 or proper size Allen bit with a T45 Torx bit. This style I can use a 3/8 ratchet to turn. Okay, I'll just fast forward here as I use that Torx bit and my ratchet and remove those two bolts.
Okay, so as the brakes wear, this is the caliper piston. That piston works its way out. So what you can do is take a big screwdriver and pry on the caliper. And just pry slowly, and you can probably see that the piston is kind of working its way back in.
Now there's a bracket that holds the caliper. You pry that off with a flat blade screwdriver. And now your caliper comes off, and you can just pull the inner brake shoe right out and then put your caliper, I kind of hang it up on the strut
Okay, so before we start
put
banging
your
on the rotor, we put a couple
caliper
wire
up, and if
ties
you're going to do any other work,
onto our
secure it with some wire ties, and then you can take your outer pad off just by pulling it right out.
Next, you'll want to remove this bracket. Okay, there are two 21mm bolts here and here. Okay, you'll need a 21mm socket. Okay, I suggest a breaker bar. And if you don't have a breaker bar, use your ratchet. Okay, and then hook a piece of pipe onto it. That gives you some extra leverage. And apply pressure nice and easy. And the bolt will start to go.
Speed up here as I loosen that one up, and then I do the same thing for the lower bolt. Then I remove the pipe and just use the ratchet and take them out the rest of the way, and then take that bracket right off.
Your vehicle may still have these little locks on it. Just pull those right off with a pair of pliers. Okay, I'm going to coat this with penetrating oil. Hopefully it'll let me get the disc off easier.
Okay, I'll just fast forward through this a little bit, but you see I put a couple of lug nuts onto the disc, and then the bigger the hammer the better, and ours is pretty rusted on there, so I just give it some strategic hits, and eventually it comes off. I'm going to show you this again real quickly. Again, if you don't have air tools, you probably already took the center hub nut off. If not, if you're working with air tools, you can do it now. An alternative is you could put the wheel back on right now, lower the vehicle to the ground, and use your hand tools to take that center hub nut off. It is a 32mm nut.
Now you're going to have to remove the 4 bolts that hold the hub. They're 15mm. Okay, they're in there. You'll have to remove this bolt here to get the center out of the way, and then you can remove the 2 bolts here on this side. Okay, well, what you can do with just a regular 15mm socket is push your axle back and get your socket on there.
Okay, I'm just going to speed right through removing those 2 bolts. Again, they're 15mm bolts, and just a regular size ratchet. They shouldn't be so tight that they don't come apart fairly easily. Now here I'm using a 10mm socket with a ratchet and extension, and removing that bolt that holds the sensor in place, and you just kind of pull that sensor and move it out of the way. And then I'll keep the fast moving action going as we remove those other 2 bolts that are kind of on the back side. Okay, now it's a matter of using a hammer. The larger the better. Beat on it a little bit, then use some penetrating oil, try and spray it in behind. And I just keep this up on this vehicle. Probably took me about 10 minutes of banging on the hub, and it finally came free. Okay, use a wire brush or some sandpaper and clean out the inside of the steering knuckle.
New hub from 1A Auto. Goes in, just like the old hub. Grab the back of your axle, put it on there, spin the flange a little bit, push it back in to the flange, and start your bolts.
Now fast forward here again as I just get all the bolts started, and then I just tighten them up preliminarily with my ratchet, socket, and extension.
We're going to torque the bolts to 45 foot-pounds.
Okay, and speed it up here more again as I torque the rest of the bolts. And what you want to do is kind of diagonally. So if you do the front top one, do the rear lower one, and then do the rear upper one, and then the front lower one. Put the center washer back on and the hub nut back on, and just tighten it up.
Tighten it preliminarily. We'll torque it
when the vehicle's on the ground. Got the wheel back on and it's back down on the ground. And put your sensor back in place and tighten that 10mm bolt back up.
New rotor from One Auto goes on. Take your bracket. The bracket goes between the steering knuckle back here and the rotor.
Okay, and poor shooting here, but I'm just putting that bracket in place, holding it in place, starting the bolts on, and then tightening up preliminarily. I also put a lug nut onto the stud just to hold things in place, make it a little easier to work.
You'll want to tighten these to 120 foot-pounds.
Just use a pair of wire cutters or something to clip your wire ties or whatever you have holding the caliper up top.
Okay, now you want to actually put your old pad back in and use a large C-clamp and force the piston back in. So as I tighten up the C-clamp, okay, try and hold it here. As I tighten up the C-clamp, you'll see the piston go back in the rest of the way. Okay, take the clamp off and take the old pad out. Okay, new pad comes with the clips to put it right in. This one just goes right into the piston. Okay, put the outer one into your caliper bracket. Put your caliper down on. Okay, once your disc is on there, kind of put one side of this bracket in and then push the other side in and push the bracket down, whoops, and on. And then come around to the back, push your bolts in.
And speed up here a little bit as I just tighten up those bolts with the Allen or Torx bit and ratchet.
Torque these to 30 foot-pounds.
Okay, now take that lug nut off and then you'll lift the wheel in place. Start the two lug nuts that are opposite the valve stem, and then put your wheel cover on and start the rest of the lug nuts. Now with the van on the ground, you want to torque the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds using a star pattern as you tighten them. After you've done both sides, pump the brakes a bunch of times and then do test stops from 5 and 10 miles an hour before road testing the vehicle. We hope this helps you out. Brought to you by www.oneauto.com, your source for quality replacement parts and the best service on the internet. Please feel free to call us toll-free 888-844-3393. We're the company that's here for you on the internet and in person.